Well, Lawrence, great to meet you, man. I'm Roie. That's Jeff. Jeff
Morning,
Wagner over
Jeff.
here with us.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi,
Hi, Roy.
Lawrence. A
I hope.
pleasure, a real pleasure. I just saw you in Greensboro in January.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
I,
Oh,
I, I
North
was
Carolina.
I was right in front of your 360 spinning keyboard and loving it, man. We were third row, and it was a fantastic show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm very glad to hear that. I'm always kind of like reluctant when I got to usually describe the show to people that haven't seen it. It's difficult, but if you've seen it, then you know what's going on.
Right on, yeah.
I've been singing your praises since I first saw you with Styx just a few years ago. I hadn't seen you for a long time, from the
Right.
point you joined Styx for years. But when I finally did, I was just like, I think I was like a one-man evangelist for Lawrence, because I was like, you got to just see, not only do you have to see Styx, but you got to see this guy. And I've been telling Roy, like, this is, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. I just like, this is the best thing that's happened to Styx in like 25 years.
I'll give you a quick backstory of the last couple of weeks, Lawrence, which was Jeff. He almost never does this, but he texted me right after the show, just going crazy about the concert and mentioning how he was right in front of you and you were amazing and all that. And then 2 weeks later, we were able to arrange this thing, and so I was like, I know who to call to join this. Let me get Jeff on this one.
That's great. That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to thank you for that lovely review, Jeff. I'm looking forward to the review from your cats at this point.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
she's more of a Kansas fan, but I'm bringing her.
see that.
I'm bringing her around.
She's turned her back on Styx entirely
Yeah.
to the point of no return. Oh,
well, right. I want to just quickly, for people that aren't familiar with you, and I don't know who wouldn't be familiar with you now by this point,
lots of people.
Lawrence, but give a little brief kind of background of how, your musical background before even Styx, but then joining Styx.
Yeah. Okay. So briefly, I'll go over. I became a professional musician at 19. I just got a degree in classical piano, but it was all to basically hoping I could play more like Wakeman and Elton and Keith Emerson and Tony Banks. But anyway, so I started at 19. I started my first professional band. It was very much similar to what Styx and Queen and maybe Genesis, yes, those progressive bands, but with a bit more pop sensibility or rock sensibility like Styx and Queen had. And that band came out right at the height of the disco era, 1976. And then its demise was in 1981, when the punk era had completely obliterated anything of progressive rock getting signed to record labels. Band disbanded. I started making solo demos, and I got a record deal with Columbia Records in 1981. My first album came out in 82. And from 82 to 99, those 14, whatever that is, 14, 15, 16 years, 17 years, I did 6 studio albums. And in Canada, my records were only released, properly in Canada. They would be available in import bins around in the rest of the world. But in Canada, I achieved 4 platinum records and 3 gold records, and people just knew my stuff. And I was on TV all the time because in the 80s, I had these videos that were, MTV actually played one, I think, twice. And it surprises me when people go, I saw that video on MTV. I'm like, wow, the impact of that, I think it was played probably 3 a.m. And it's still amazing how many people to this day have said, I saw that video, the one where you turn into a cartoon. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Anyway, in 1997, I got to do a show with Styx. I hadn't opened for anyone in Canada since Supertramp in 85, early 85. And, but I was doing a completely solo piano tour. And promoter had promoted me before a solo piano tour, and it was a fortuitous night because the audience really responded great to my material. They knew it intimately well, and then the Styx show I saw was spectacular. I really enjoyed them, and so that was kind of the connection there in 97, and in 99. They called and asked me to join the band, and I've been with them now 24 years, going to year 20, starting year 25 in about a month.
I wanted to ask you also, so recently you guys put out Crash of the Crown,
Yes.
which absolutely one of my favorite albums of the year. It was really spectacular. And I was raving to everybody that you have to hear this album. I think it's one of the best albums the band has ever done. Um, Talk about making that record. Like I mean, because you were actively involved in you have lead vocals all over that thing, and it's talk about that record and working on that one a little bit.
Sure. Things in the recording part of Styx really clicked in for us. I'd say in around 2014 when they re-signed with Universal. There was a renewed interest in the album as an art form. These vinyl stores that were once the domain just of the kind of hipsters broadened, and suddenly people wanted to hear albums and wanted their vinyl back again, and they wanted some new things on vinyl. And that sort of opened the door to us making a complete album that really had no focus on any sort of single or any lead track or anything of that nature at all, but instead kind of was in the tradition of a classic rock album from from the 70s, mainly 70s, 80s. And Tommy had worked with this fellow Willie Vankovich, and it was a great musical partner. He co-wrote and he produced the first album we did together, was The Mission. And at arm's length, he really was able to kind of pull together what he felt were the strongest elements of the cohesive unit of the band from what he knew of our live shows. And The Mission was very successful. We wound up playing shows in Las Vegas and Boston and New York of just that album in its entirety. And that opened the door to us making Crash of the Crown. So again, Will was on board as the producer and co-writer. And by the time we finished the record and went through the pandemic period of 2020, we realized, why don't we just make him a member of the band so we can, he's going to keep us musically kind of focused on the new material and how it connects, we hope, seamlessly with the classic material that the band had produced decades ago. And, we were stunned, elated, ecstatically happy that the album, when we went back on the road in 2021, Crash of the Crown, Billboard now have a rock album chart, right? They've music's been so dissected into various sectors, and we went to number one on that chart, which was an astounding thing for the band to achieve in its 50th year of existence.
No, I wanted to say, I think, I'm sure you've said this in many interviews before that I haven't read, but I love that JY and Tommy give you so much latitude with writing and performing. Obviously you're not just kind of a side guy. You are, just as upfront as they are, even, them being, JY, obviously an original member, Tommy Shaw, yeah. We don't need to,
no,
it needs no introduction, but they seem to give you the latitude. Has it always been like that in the band? Like the moment you came in, like
quite honestly, Jeff, they gave me the latitude right from the very beginning, in that they decided that they didn't want to try to extend the life of the band by having a sound alike or look alike or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They really knew that I had my own, personality, I suppose, and manner of singing, and I couldn't do an impression anyway, even if I wanted to. So they gave me that. Now that entailed that, I was able to bring my spinning piano and all those things that I like to use on stage. But I have to say that it took a while for me the integration into the live show was pretty seamless in a way. I think I can't remember any big bumps in the road there. There were a few things that we had to kind of reconfigure, but becoming a member of a band after you've had a long solo career, that was more of a learning curve for me, not for them. They'd already been doing it for decades. And so I had to kind of figure that out. And I think that's why I stressed the last 10 years, really. I think that's where I finally found how to integrate whatever gifts I can bring to the band, how to integrate them into the overall mindset or spirit of what the band is as a recording entity. And so that I think that's my kind of best contribution to the band, was figuring out how I could work myself into the fabric of what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's worked. It's worked brilliantly because they let you be your own man, yet it still sticks. It's like you kind of understand what this band is about, and you exert your personality into it, and it's just it's seamless and it's beautiful. I couldn't be happier for where Styx is just as a fan right now.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to hear that. I've had similar experiences where bands have to change, particularly a front member or a member that's really pivotal to the spirit of the band. And I think that one of the more successful ways of achieving that, I've seen it's been done, right? It's been done where the personnel changes, but the spirit of the band somehow, almost miraculously, can remain intact. And my two main examples I usually go to exemplify that would be about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. I was at the Rolling Stones concert, and they had the big runway, and so I had a good seat, and Mick comes by, and then Keith comes by, and then Ron Wood came by, and I looked at Ron Wood and I thought, this guy's got such a legacy of stuff that he's done outside the Rolling Stones, but he's every bit as much a Rolling Stone as anyone that's ever been in that band. I mean, he's the third guitarist. He's not the second, he's the third. And I'm thinking of, Brian Jones and then Mick Taylor, who made stellar contributions. I mean, there wouldn't be a band, I don't think, without Brian Jones. And then Mick Taylor was in the biggest material they ever did with Sticky Fingers and Exile on Main Street. And yet Ron Wood, he exemplifies, or he lives, breathes, and sweats the spirit of what the Rolling Stones is. And I thought, that's why that's worked. Somehow the spirit of this band survived that. And I think the same could be said for Genesis, which is even more miraculous because that was a pivotal front member. And I remember in my own little story of my love for that band being so negative at first about the fact that the drummer, whose name I didn't know, was going to be the I had a friend of mine, in fact, a very close friend of mine from high school, kept saying to me, Trick of the Tail is the best album they've made. And I just thought, don't be ridiculous. They don't have Peter Gabriel now, right? And by that time, by the time he kept saying that, I had the first Gabriel album, which I just was like, oh, thank God he left that band. He's so great on his own. And, and then finally I listened to Trick of the Tail. I was like, yeah. And then he goes, got an extra ticket if you want to see him. I was like, okay. So I saw the Seconds Out tour, and I saw that, Phil Collins was every bit the front man that band needed, a complete entity unto his own, and yet connected to the Peter Gabriel spirit of that band. I mean, he had his own way of presenting the theatrics that were necessary, like in Supper's Ready and songs like that. And yet he brought it to a different place. And so in some ways, I think, not that I'm comparing myself to those two, but in some way, the spirit of what I think I brought into Styx helped to extend the life of the band. And that's, like I say, it's been done. And I think it's been done well when people don't try to emulate or do an impression of what preceded them.
Yeah, I think I've come around on that as well over the last, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years, when you've had all these other bands that, for whatever reason, maybe a band member passed away, maybe a band member left, whatever the case is, you have Yes continuing, you have Kansas, that has put in members over decades, and after seeing even you guys recently over the last few years and seeing Kansas and hearing their new music and your new music, I came to the realization that who cares? It continues, and it's music that's celebrated, and it gives other generations the opportunity to get to know the music. And I think it's all great. And if it's done, like you said, with the right spirit and attitude, I've enjoyed new music by you guys and by Kansas and by Yes, and seeing the band's tour. I just saw Yes, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, and they were amazing. It was a great show. So, you know what I mean?
Speaking of Yes, around 1990, this all ties together. Around 1990, I read an interview, I think it was in Melody Maker, with Rick Wakeman, one of my favorite keyboard players, obviously. And in this article, the question was, Does it bother you that other members have come into the band, or or do you still think of yourself as being one of the pivotal five? That are really the, because he's on the biggest records. And his answer back then, it kind of surprised me. His answer was, "Doesn't bother me in the least. In fact, it'll be a yes in 100 years from now." And I thought, what's he talking about? And I'm reading. He says, 200 years, and even the writer was saying, how can that be possible? I mean, you'll all be gone most likely. And he said, no, there'll be a yes. There'll be a yes that goes on, because this is he's been proven totally right. This is the big musical statement of the last half of the 20th century is classic rock. We've witnessed that now. It's outlived the expected shelf life. It expired a long time ago, and it's still going very strong. But he said, he made this analogy. 200 years ago, there was a London Symphony, and they played Beethoven. And today there's a London Symphony, and guess what they play? They play Beethoven, right? And it's down to the listener or whoever is the individual to decide, well, I like this version or I don't like this version. So it's entirely a subjective thing. But at the time that I read that, I thought he's way off the mark. And now, of course, I've seen, no, he was right on the money. It is exactly what has happened. This music is going on. And if somehow the spirit of that original marker, the original name, the original spirit of that band, as long as that remains intact, I think it's a viable thing to say that is that band. And I love listening to old Styx stuff too. And I listen to it and kind of go, man, that was great. And I acknowledge, obviously, that the band is what it is today because of the efforts of everyone that's ever been in it. And that's only, at this point now, it's only 11 people over 51 years.
We are at this interesting cusp where we have a yes going around that technically doesn't have any original members. I mean, Howe came in on the third album,
Right.
Peter Banks is the original guitarist, and and unfortunately, obviously, death has happened to that band, and but we're at an interesting apex where we are going to see bands more like Yes, where maybe not even any original members, but if the essence is still there, people are still coming to see it. Again, we've been throwing out the example of Styx and Kansas, two bands that I think are just as strong as they've ever been. And still putting out viable new material. It's amazing. Yeah. So we'll see where this goes.
Well, you also have, to throw one more band in there, Foreigner, that has had been an original member forever.
Yeah.
And they're doing just fine. So I think it comes down to the music.
It's funny, but Foreigner is another great example. When an album I had in 1985 was really starting to bust out, and it looked like Columbia Records was going to release it in the States, and just on import, I had gotten into the top 20 in a couple of markets, and one was Cleveland, and so I went and I was asked to open the show for Foreigner on Foreigner 4, and they were great, but the Foreigner we play with today are just as great. I can't really distinguish between the two and say, oh, it's a shame they've really let it, it hasn't drifted at all. And in some ways, they play the songs even more exact because they've got a couple of extra guys in the band that really can fill out the sound even more. So that's another great example.
When you are touring in whatever market, do you notice certain songs resonate more? That you play, and is it this typical Come Sail Away, or is there other ones that you're surprised to find out that's the real audience kind of pleaser track?
Do you know what's amazing is about on any given night? I don't know if you noticed this, Jeff, at the show you saw in Greensboro, but on any given night, as much as half of the audience can be under 40. Let's say 40, and of that, maybe 2/3, maybe even sometimes 3/4 of them could be under 30. And they know the songs intimately well. And because they weren't inundated with the radio airplay, they're not as galvanized. They're not as stuck on, Blue Collar Man and Come Sail Away and Renegade. I am amazed to find that for a lot of, we call them the newer listeners, although the songs like Man in the Wilderness might be their favorite song. Or they might go, this is what I really began to notice after 2017 with The Mission. they might jump up and down just as much about Radio Silence as they do about Crystal Ball, because they don't have that delineation of these are the songs I heard on the radio over and over and over. So these are my faves. They've gone into the albums and they've found other songs in there that really have risen to their, to resonate with them.
I was eyewitness to that in Greensboro. My wife and I were next to a couple over here and a couple over here. Yeah. And this couple on our right were like, they couldn't have been out of their 20s.
Right.
And they had Styx shirts on, and they knew not only the older music, but they knew stuff from the new album. And I love to see that. You know what I mean? I love to see these people who weren't even born when freaking Kilroy was out. You know what I mean? Like these are really young folks, and
they come with a really
it's amazing. It's amazing. I love it. And that night, Fooling Yourself, I don't know why, but like in Greensboro, I was looking around, like looking behind me going, this place is lighting up for Fooling Yourself. Like, who knew? Right. It was like that was the hit of the night. Like it was great. Yeah, it was great.
Very often that happens, and that's I'm so glad you saw that, because that's, I keep saying to people, if they haven't seen Styx ever, I say, I have no hesitation in telling you that you will enjoy the experience of seeing this band live.
Oh yeah.
There's something that happens. There's a chemical thing that they can do. I mean, I just witnessed it last night. There were a couple of guys right in front of where I was, they were freaking out to a degree, and they were maybe early 30s at the most, but still not born when the biggest albums of the classic rock era came out. Absolutely, they looked like myself at a Yes concert in like 1978, frothing at the mouth with enthusiasm that I unbridled, completely total abandon at what this is doing to me. I remember being at even 74, I think, of like Tales of Topographic Oceans, that just hearing that live blew my mind. Anyway, and they were just
I will give you guys a lot of credit for pushing forward with playing new material in your shows, and because I think that's something that I'd love to see more bands that have been around with a lot of hits and certainly don't need to put in new material in the show. I love hearing new songs, and I think you guys don't do just one. You do 3, 4, 5 sometimes. Which I think is great.
The trick, if there's a trick, is first of all, have a really good song that can stand up right. That precedes it and follows it. That's the tallest order. But the second part is there's a way that you can present it in the show, and you would have seen this, Jeff, where we kind of seamlessly blend them in with the, not necessarily make a big delineation of, let the material, for example, we do a new piece called, if it was in the show the other night, Sound the Alarm, which dovetails straight into Crystal Ball. They're separated by 46 years, and yet one is very complementary to the other. That to me is a really useful thing. In these shows in the last couple of weeks, we've been opening with a piece from Crash the Crown called A Monster, and that's a great opener. That's a real plot, kind of real statement. But that, before you even know that you've gotten halfway into that song, Blue Collar Man is kicked in, and so it just it pulls the present and the past into close proximity enough that the listener is not jarred by something new. Instead, it's integrated into what they know of that sound that they're looking for.
Yeah, I always thought it was weird when a band would come out and say, and now we're going to play 3 or 4 songs from our new album. That's the worst thing you can do, because then everybody goes, all right, then we'll be back in 20 minutes. And everybody gets up and leaves.
That's a mistake. That's a mistake. And look, we, from the stage, we say the audience is a show as well. And if we see any movement of that in that regard, the set list gets changed the next night. Quite honestly, we know whatever happened here, their attention was broken by this one bit that we put in. Sometimes that can be an older song too, by the way. But anyway, but more likely it's a newer piece. The great thing about the younger section of the audience is they're far more like yourselves. They're far more open to, let me hear something you're doing right now, because I I wasn't there when the band was doing all this material in the past, and I'm not entirely married to that era of the band because it's tied to my youth and tied to the memory of, the first time I, stole an 8-track out of a car, whatever.
Well, you know what has a lot to do with that? It's I have a 9-year-old, and she sometimes comes to me with songs she's heard,
Yeah.
and didn't hear it from a radio or anything, doesn't know it's a hit, doesn't know if it was a hit, and sometimes it's a humongous song from like the 70s, something, and she's listening to it like, and I go, "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, on YouTube." I'm like, "I like it, can we listen to it?" Great, absolutely, and doesn't care if it's trendy, popular, new,
No.
old, doesn't matter.
No, that this is, we lament a lot of the downside of the internet and what it did to the music business, let's put it that way, for a while. But there's a gigantic upside, and that is that, like your daughter, you hear the name Led Zeppelin, you don't know what the hell it means, but you go, okay, Led Zeppelin. Oh, take out the A. Okay. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then suddenly you hear Black Dog, and you suddenly go, what the hell? This is on fire. It's this, and it just, you can feel it. And I do say, I don't know why we were so surprised by this. I think it's because we were kind of almost programmed to believe that the popular music was very transient. It wouldn't last. Okay. But I remember listening to, when I was like in the 70s or, learning, really going through my pianos, I remember listening to ragtime music when it was about, at that point, maybe only about 50 years old, and being really, drawn to it, and feeling like I gotta learn, I gotta figure out what this is. I love the feeling of this, I love what it's evoking. Why wouldn't that happen now with rock music that let's put it from 1950 to 2000, let's say, carved out those 50 years of music on the planet and what it really, where it went when electricity was introduced to it, and how a small combo could make a big sound and make a big statement that people could really be pulled in by.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Well
that's why you
said.
have songs like "Carry On Wayward Son" or "Come Sail
Yeah.
Away" or
Yeah.
"Bohemian Rhapsody," or
Yeah.
that's why they keep appearing every 15 years to new generations. They keep coming
Yeah.
back.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. I think I'd also say that melody, if I was going to wave the flag for rock about what it is that has stuck with people, I think there's just some great melodies in there, and melody goes into our brains in a different area where the abstract begins to take over, and suddenly you in the mysterious language of music, you connect yourself somehow to that melodic phrase, and once it's in there, it won't leave. So
It's like part of our DNA at that point,
it is.
right? Yeah, yeah. It becomes very important. It becomes very emotional. When you guys hit that crescendo live on that particular moment, it's just, it's a highlight in a night of highlights. It's very powerful. Yeah, and no wonder this stuff keeps coming back. I mean, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys planning on making any more new albums, new music? Is there anything sort of down the line?
We're, okay, so we're planning on blasting ahead for the next 50 years and doing the same thing, like trying to, see where the music of Styx and this, what classic rock is now, or what rock is to us now, how far we can extend that. The realities of life are going to intercede to some degree, and we're going to have to face that at some point. But until then, it seems to me like we're really pushing on the accelerator far more than even touching the brakes, if I could use that analogy. We really feel we're kind of on a new roll now, and defying the barriers that age and there's no kind of jaded thinking or in any way in the band at all. It's when it comes to the music that we can do, etc. If there's any area of that where there's some sort of crotchetiness, it would just be about having to deal with the airlines and getting on flights. It has nothing to do with
I know you got to run. I just wanted to say that you mentioned "Sound the Alarm." I
Yeah.
thought during the pandemic that was one of the songs that really just struck with me
Yeah,
a
me too.
lot. I
Yeah,
thought
me
it was
too.
powerful. I thought that whole album was maybe it was during the pandemic why it hit me so well, but I just it was I really appreciated having that album at that time. I have
It
to
hit
say.
us too. Crash of the Crown, when we put it aside at first when the lockdowns happened, and then when we went and listened, we realized we're really onto something here. It's somehow miraculously connecting to the emotions that we're feeling, and people are most likely going to be able to relate to. And it hit me that way. So I wasn't part of the writing on Sound the Alarm, but that was one of the songs that I was like, this fits exactly what we're going through, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for giving us some time, Lawrence. Really, it was a lot of fun getting to talk to you and go over all this stuff. It's great, and congrats with everything going on with the band. And hopefully, let's try and do the top five at some point when we get you back on again, and we'll make that happen.
the top five, I did see that you wanted to know that moving target for me. So I'm going to give it to you really quick, and we'll close with that.
Okay, let's do that.
We'll get a chance to chat again.
Speed round.
Okay, so Renegade's at the top of the list. It's my favorite one to do on stage, and it just has phenomenal legs, that song. Grand Illusion would be my second one because I think it's a very prescient song that really, I love the lyrics of that piece, and it's got that little Beatlesque thing with the descending, if you think your life is
Right.
love that little bit. Crystal Ball, that's the first Styx song I ever heard on the radio in Toronto, and I remember being pulled into it right away, thinking, what band is this? And then realized, wow, it's a progressive band, but not from Britain. So that has a lot of emotional connection to me. Come Sail Away, I think it's just a tremendous overall piece that just works. It's an epic piece. And then I'm going to kind of jump to, blow my own horn, part of being part of the band, which is, I think the song Crash of the Crown is really strong. Part of what I think is so strong about it is all the previous four I mentioned. There are elements of all four of those in there. There are three lead singers. You get Jay Wyatt first, then Tommy, then myself. And I love the sharp twists and turns that song goes through. And it really gives it, in the short 4 minutes, a really, if I can use the word epic, feeling live, because the mood shifts so dramatically, and which is what I love about progressive rock. And yet it's very accessible, at the same time. So
yeah, that was a really proggy type single for you guys to come out with, which was really impressive. Yeah.
I like the proggy.
Sure. Yeah.
Proggy.
Don't we
Right
all?
on. All right, man. Enjoy the next show, and we'll talk again soon.
Let's do that. Great to talk to
Absolutely.
you guys.
Good luck,
Thanks,
man. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All
Thank
the
you,
best.
Lawrence. Take
Cheers.
care.
Bye now.